Hey everyone, welcome to this month's client update. I cannot believe that it's the end of August, that summer is already behind us, and I'm excited to share a few updates with you, both on what's going on in Redwood Money, a few reflections on this idea of growth and recession, using the example that you can see here on the screen of Big Basin Redwood State Park, where Jordan and I recently visited and looked at the aftermath of a fire that came through a couple of years ago, and a few next steps for clients as we head into fall in some year-end financial planning. So let's jump right in with the updates on Redwood Money. The first one is a personal update. Sophia turned 1, so Jordan and I are officially 1 year into this parenting thing, and we are so excited and just really enjoyed this summer celebrating with her as she learned to walk. We had her first birthday party. We dedicated her at church. She is just so dynamic and full of joy, and it's been so special being her dad and getting to watch that. And I've experienced a lot of love from many of you in Sophia's life, and so we really appreciate that, and that's just a personal update that I'm excited about. The second update is that we're at 37 clients and counting at Redwood Money. And I ultimately have you to thank for that. That as clients, you've trusted me as your financial advisor. And I told many of you that the goal of the company for this year was to get to 36 clients, which was an ambitious goal. In fact, there's a benchmarking study that this group of advisors I belong to, it's about 1,500 advisors that I look at. And on average, new advisors get about 14 clients in their first year. So the fact that I'm already ahead at 37 clients and still have 4 months of the year left, it's just a testament to your trust. I so appreciate it. I want you to know a couple of things. The first one is I love doing what I'm doing. And I love it so much that there was some concern when I started Redwood Money, like, will this be a viable business that I can do for years to come? Because that's where the real meat and benefits of financial planning come, is through years of partnership. And that question is off the table now. This is a business that is viable. It's going to support my family. And so thank you so much for that. That's really exciting to me. The second one is I'm super committed, both for my sake and for your sake, to running a business in a sustainable way. So I'm actually capping my client count at 45 for 2022. So even if people want to come on board, I'm going to just stop taking on clients between now and the end of the year at that number. I'll reopen the client list in spring of next year, because I want to make sure that I can deliver solid financial plans and updates through the end of the year to each of you. And I also want to make sure that I'm not burning out and that I'm available to Sophia and Jordan and you as clients in the ways that I want to be, because that is my priority. And ultimately, when I think about my financial plan, that is one of my core values. So I'm capping those clients. The final thing I'll say related to that is, if you have any friends or family that you are hoping to refer, now would be the time to do that. Send an introduction to me at Jeff@Redwood Money. It's no big deal if it happens next year. Like I said, I'll reopen the client count and probably get to 65 to 70 clients next year by the end of the year. But I wanted you to know that that's what's going on. And I wanted to say, thank you. I get chills when I'm delivering financial plans, when I see the light bulb turn on for you, and when we get to see the outcomes of clarifying people's financial goals and the stress really fall off as you see that you're going to be okay as you pursue both your short-term and your long-term goals. So thank you for that. Third and final update is, if you didn't see them, and I emailed them to everybody on my client list, I've got 2 new videos that I created over the last couple months that are really focused on things that you can control. The first one's called A Better Way to Budget. This was a 2-part video where I talked about budgeting philosophy in the first 15-minute video, and then implementing your budget in Right Capital in the second 15-minute video. You can find that on YouTube. The second one is called The Money Tree: How to Build Wealth Automatically. And this was a really fun project that actually came out of many of my conversations with you, as you wanted a clear and succinct way to think about where your next dollar was going. I developed this concept of a money tree to give you a map of your financial plan where each dollar will go. If you haven't watched that yet, I recommend watching it. And if we haven't gone through your money tree yet, know that I'm actually working on those for all of my existing clients between now and the end of September. So you'll be hearing from me in the next 4 weeks to review your money tree together. Now, with the remaining time in this month's update, I wanted to talk a little bit about this concept of growth and recession. And I'm using the example of Big Basin redwoods both because of, the company name and because I find it fascinating what happens in forests when they face stresses like fires and floods and droughts and pests. And a case study for this that's really sad is 2 years ago. There was this huge lightning storm in the Bay Area, and it started a complex of many fires that then connected with each other. And there were many of these up and down the coast. I think the first and second biggest wildfires in California state history happened in 2020 as a result of this. And one giant fire that burnt in the Santa Cruz Mountains right near us was this complex fire that came through Big Basin Redwood State Park, which you can see here on the screen, and 97% of that forest was impacted by these fires. On the left-hand side here, you can see the visitor center, which was built in the 19th century. This beautiful log and stone cabin that got burnt completely to a crisp. All you can see there is the chimney. And then on the right-hand side, this is the biggest tree, or formerly the biggest tree in the forest. It's still standing. Her name's the Mother of the Forest. And originally, she stood 329 feet tall. A handful of years ago, there was a lightning strike that lopped off about 35 feet from the crown of the tree, but still standing today, still growing today. But these were pictures within a few months of the fire. And the fire burned so hot, and these trees are so big, that in fact it hadn't been fully put out for 6 months, as there would still be these smoldering embers inside of these trees from this giant forest fire that ripped through this forest. And many of you, if you lived in California, you remember this because we had those super eerie days during the pandemic where we were locked inside and you could look outside and it was orange sunrises and sunsets. Ash was falling on your breakfast as you ate outside. I remember this super vividly. But then winter comes, spring comes. We're now 2 years away from this forest fire. And I actually went out to Big Basin, and Jordan and I drove there. I'm only sitting probably 45 minutes from this park right now. And I got to see this huge transformation that's been happening over the last couple of years as the forest recovers. And this is from an article on a different fire in 2008, but a Berkeley ecologist, Benjamin S. Ramage, said 1 year later, even large trees, where all the foliage was scorched off, were covered with a light green fuzz of new foliage. Of trees over 1.5 feet in diameter, maybe only one redwood out of 100 was killed. And it's an amazing story that we can now see being played out at Big Basin. What's happening here on the screen is these are redwood trees that look nothing like any tree that you've seen before. Many of the branches were burnt off. But as a response to that stress, in order for the trees to stay alive, the living part of the tree called the cambium shoots out sprouts in this phenomena called epicormic sprouting. And those sprouts cover the entire tree so that the tree can continue doing the work of photosynthesis and support future growth to recover. It's this beautiful picture that redwoods do, and they'll do this across the tree. And then what you'll also sometimes see when there's damage to a tree is they'll shoot out sprouts, which are really clones of the tree at the base of the tree that then begin to grow. And if any of you have ever walked through a redwood forest and you've seen a fairy ring, which is a ring of trees that are second generation, where in the center there used to be the big tree that fell. That is why those fairy rings are created, is because of these sprouts that come up, and they're able to grow because there's a clearing that is created by the trees. I've got a few other photos that I'll walk you through. It's so fascinating walking through here and seeing that this area that usually you wouldn't see any sunlight on the ground, it would be totally blotted out because of the density of the canopy. You can see here these trees that are growing that are 3 and 4 feet tall, and not all of them will make it, but these trees weren't even sprouted because the heat of the fire is required with redwood trees often for the cones to release seeds, which then can grow, and they grow really well, as you'd expect, when there's fresh ash and water on the ground. And so you see the life of a forest being played out here with new growth and then old trees that are surviving through this epicormic sprouting. I loved this photo. These are some pretty tall trees, probably 150 feet tall, and the bottom 50 feet or so is covered in black ash, and they've been totally burnt. But the upper branches survived and are continuing to grow, and probably 5-10 years from now, even that bottom 50 feet, it'll be covered in new bark. There will be a few scars from the fire, But people won't know that this happened because the forest will have recovered, not immediately, but over a period of years. Finally, I talked about those sprouts that come out of the base of trees, and you can see this happening here along the roadside. And I loved driving through here and thinking about this, especially right now, as we're in the context of probably an economic recession. And we're being reminded that the economy doesn't just grow indefinitely. Many of us were spoiled over the last probably 13 or so years, 2008 to 2021, where you had a lot of economic growth coming out of the global financial crisis. And I wanted to share a few reflections that are tied into this analogy of forests, because I see a lot of comparisons here about these complex systems that are able to endure these really stressful events, and that those events actually create the seeds of new growth for both an economy and for a forest. So I've got 5 reflections I'll quickly jump through. The first couple kind of come together. The first one is that when we say investing involves risk, recessions, which is a period of negative growth for the economy, are one of those risks. In fact, when we think about risk as investors, there's 2 kind of meta categories of risk. There is market risk, which happens to anybody who invests who invests in any company, right? Because the market is impacted by the broader system. So think about an economy. Companies are like trees inside of that economy. The only habitat that a company can grow in is in the economy. So when a recession hits, pretty much all of the companies are affected in one way or another. Now, a second type of risk would be company-specific risk, or they call it idiosyncratic risk. And that's any company also has risks that are unique to that company. And it won't impact another company if, for instance, a CEO makes a terrible decision, or a new competitor comes in and they innovate faster than the existing company and that company falls behind. But this is part of the reason why investing involves risk. It's not just about choosing a company. It's that companies live in the habitat of an economy, and economies tend to experience these recessions every 4 to 6 years. They're cyclical. And as a result, we need to understand that these things happen, and know that as a result, there are going to be times where we see pullbacks or bear markets as a result of sometimes these recessions. Now, the second point is that economies are very complex, and because of globalization, they're increasingly interrelated. But with that being said, it's really difficult to predict outcomes in the short term, a little easier to identify long-term trends like economic growth. I love this quote from Lawrence J. Peter. He says, "An economist is an expert who will know tomorrow why the things he predicted yesterday didn't happen today." And this is, a little jab at economists, but we see this. And any of you who have been following the news have been following sort of the embarrassment that the Federal Reserve faced when they kept saying this inflation thing, it's nothing to worry about. The word that was used a lot was it's transitory. It's not going to stay. It's not sticky. It's related to the pandemic. Well, economists agreed with the Federal Reserve. In fact, the Fed was looking at the economic data alongside the economists, and economists of all stripes were saying this is going to go away. Well, here we are, a year away from when they were saying things are transitory, it's going to go away, and we've had this persistent inflation. It's been pretty bad, and it's not just because it's difficult to predict outcomes, right? It's that the economists that were making those predictions, what they couldn't know was what would happen in January, February, and March this year. They didn't know that there was going to be a big COVID resurgence that would lock down Shanghai and further muck up supply chains. They didn't know that Russia was going to invade Ukraine and cause a giant set of issues related to our energy. And so the point of this is not to say that we can predict what's going to happen. It's rather to say, how do we plan, knowing that recessions will come, so that as an investor that is investing in companies, you're able to withstand and actually continue to grow for the future. Because Big Basin Redwood State Park is actually a testament to being able to endure floods and fires and pests and people who come in and would destroy it. But many of these trees have lived for over 1,000 years, and they'll live for hundreds of years more. And so what makes them durable, these forests, in a way that maybe we can learn from and we can apply in our own financial plans? Well, the first principle that comes to mind for me is that diversification is really important. And it's important because companies are going to be impacted unequally by a recession. We're technically in a recession right now because we've had 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth for the economy. It's not a huge recession, but companies are being impacted, and we're seeing that as they pull back spend, but it's not happening equally. Some companies are thriving right now. You think about oil companies, which were really hurt in 2020 and 2021 as our entire economy effectively shut down because of the COVID pandemic. And there was a recession that brought oil prices down in the range of $40 a barrel. Well, those companies were really struggling then, and everybody wanted to invest in technology. And technology did really well as we followed stories like Zoom and like Peloton, these companies that somehow benefited from this huge disruption to our economy. Well, some companies thrive and other companies fail, and we've seen actually a reversal recently as those oil companies are doing quite well because of the energy issues that are being caused by the war between Russia and Ukraine. And now oil is up around $100 a barrel. Those companies are having record profits, and it's the technology companies that are struggling as interest rates rise, as maybe some of the demand for their products was pulled forward over the last couple of years, and they're having to adjust their earnings estimates down, which is causing people to say, I want to pay less for this stock because it's not as profitable as we thought it was going to be at this stage. So what can we learn from this as an investor? Well, it's really hard to pick and choose specific companies and think of like trees to invest in. And you really don't want to have everything invested in any one company, because when a fire comes, when any natural disaster comes and faces a company or an economy, you want to make sure that you're spread out across many different industries, different sizes of companies, both small, medium, and large, and even across different geographies. So yes, the full US, but even globally, looking at developed, international, and emerging markets. And when we invest in your 401k or in a Betterment account, we're very mindful to do this both in the stock portion of your portfolio and in the bond portion of your portfolio to make sure that you're not facing too much risk in that portion of your portfolio. The fourth point I want to make is that these recessions and shocks, they actually create space for innovation and new companies forming. As you think about new companies forming, right, imagine those little Christmas tree redwood trees growing under the branches of these older trees that were wiped out in the fire. Right, those are going to be the next leg of growth in the forest, and this happens in economies as well, as some of the old guard companies are taken out through innovation and market dynamic shifting or poor management. It creates space as the people behind those companies are freed up to work on new problems for those to grow. You also see innovation within companies as they learn to do more with less, to tighten their belts in a way that they wouldn't do if there weren't these shocks or recessions that were happening. And I think about companies that came really close to going out of business, like Apple, that have faced many different seasons of recessions. And Apple, was founded many years ago, probably 40 plus years ago. And it wasn't really until 2006 to 2008 with the innovation of the iPhone that we saw that company, which had been a good company to invest in for many years, become an incredible company to invest in for the last 15 years as they had a new product cycle that really took that company to being the largest company in the world. You want to be invested across all of these different places because companies are going to adjust in the face of recessions, and we want to be ready for it. The fact is that challenges finally jolt humanity out of the complacency that we can easily fall into when things are going great and into action, which then fosters that next stage of growth. And I'm seeing this happening with clients. For many of you, to your credit, you're not calling me and saying, Jeff, what can we do to fix the stock market? I've got a hint for you. There's nothing I can do to adjust the way the stock market reacts. We're talking right now about things like adjusting spending behaviors, about thinking about how to take full advantage of tax benefits within your accounts, looking for new areas to save, and being creative with the parts of your balance sheet that we can control. And I see that because as we face these challenges, I'm seeing these opportunities that are also being created. And new reflections that clients are having that are leading us to what I believe will be the next stage of growth in your finances and in your life. And so finally, to kind of bring all this together, I love thinking about this idea of tree rings. And you can see here on the graphic on the screen that over the course of decades, you're going to have these trees that grow a lot in the early years. For many of my accumulator clients, what happens in the markets doesn't matter a ton because they're saving 10 or 20% of their net worth every single year, and that number is going to go up. For some of my clients who are in retirement, they've already done most of this growth, and they know that these next few years, it's really going to depend on how their portfolio performs. We don't know if you're going to be in a year where there's a really great rainy season and a ton of growth, like 2021 or 2020 were, or if it's going to be a dry season like 2022 has been so far, or if there's going to be an issue like this scar from a forest fire that comes up. What we do know is if we look historically, that being a long-term investor who's diversified and limits costs and is tax smart, all the things that we focus on in your financial plan, that we want to be positioned for growth, not just over a quarter or over a year, but over many years to be able to experience that growth and move from recession through growth in your financial plan. And I'm so happy to be your advisor because I get to shepherd you along the way as we have those discussions and as we walk through an uncertain future together. All right, finally, what's next? A few final thoughts as we head into the new year. If you want to discuss this or anything else, you can always schedule time with me at redwoodmoney.com/meet. Remember that if you want to look at your financial plan or your investments, you don't need to meet with me to do that. We've got it all digitized and it updates every day for you, both in Right Capital, so you can do a QR code there if you want to see that, and in Betterment. And you can use your phone to do a QR code there or open the apps to check those things out. The second thing is look out for your money tree. Like I said, I'll be working on those between now and the end of September. So we'll have a conversation about that and make sure that we're completely on the same page about where your money's going, especially as we head out of this year and into a new year. And finally, one of the things that's on my radar is typically open enrollment is happening right around now, September, October, November. Those emails that you usually ignore saying that open enrollment is starting, please take a look at them. If you've got a benefit statement, I would love to see it so I can help you walk through this and see if there are awesome planning opportunities for any new benefits or existing benefits if you're a W-2 employee and your company has these benefits. So please forward that information to me, or you can upload that to your file vault and let me know. I'll take a look. I'll let you know if anything needs to change, and we can walk through open enrollment season together. Thank you so much. I look forward to having more conversations about your plan, and I will see you next month for our next client update.